Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Successful Change in the Digital Experience webinar this morning with Gareth Story from Cardiff Metropolitan University. Just a little bit of housekeeping to get us started. We are recording this webinar, so if you find yourself having to step away or you'd like to catch up on something afterwards, or indeed share it with colleagues, you can do so with the recording afterwards. As I just said, if you want to introduce yourself on the chat, that would be lovely. We're very happy to encourage networking. Drop us a line to say what you're interested in about this event or to connect with other people. And if you have a question for one of our speakers today, please do pop it in the Q&A as we go through. I know we've had some questions in advance already, but if you've got a question that comes up as you're watching the webinar, then please do pop it into the Q&A as well. So let's get going. Who are we? Well, this morning we are delighted to be joined by Gareth Story, who's the project manager for Cardiff Metropolitan University's Student Lifecycle Improvement Project. Gareth's been a project manager for over 10 years now, and he's got a track record of success managing complex transformational IT projects covering system procurement, implementation and business process change. So yeah, no mean feat there, Gareth. Every aspect of everything to do with transformation. You're definitely the right guy for this webinar this morning. So welcome and thank you again for joining us. And in her first foray out of Qantas, we're also delighted to have Melody Ascari joining us. Melody is our Director of Business and Digital Consulting for Education. And although she doesn't look young enough to have 20 years experience in higher education, I mean old enough, sorry Melody, in higher education systems, she is a self-styled ed tech evangelist. I'm sure we'll hear more about what you mean by that, Melody, as we go through, which means she's uniquely placed to tackle transformation change with a view from both within HE and from a consultancy perspective also. So delighted to have Melody joining us too. And for those of you that haven't met me before, my name's Janine Chasmer. I'm one of our executive consultants at Qantas. I work primarily with our HE clients, although I do also work with some of our not-for-profit organisations as well. And primarily I work alongside Melody, looking at how to improve operational experience and student experience within higher education. Thanks to those of you that are introducing yourselves to the chat. It's lovely to meet you too, and we hope you'll enjoy this webinar this morning. We're due to go through to around 10:45, 11 o'clock, so hopefully you've got a cup of tea and you're ready to go. Of course, if you sorry Melody, I was just going to say, if you'd like to join or connect with us on LinkedIn afterwards, we've popped our information in the chat, so do feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all over LinkedIn, so by all means, drop us a line or a message. So thanks, both Janine and Gareth. Really, it's lovely to be here. You've had to deal a little bit with my nerves this morning, so well done for being patient as well. So I can see we have representation from all over the country, and I know it's a really busy period of time in the HE calendar, so it's really genuinely lovely to see so many of you here to talk about successful change management during a programme of digital transformation. And of course, we've got Gareth to help us here along the way. So before we really get into the nitty-gritty, I think I just wanted to take a moment to reflect a little bit. One of the things that really amazes me about the higher education sector is the way in which we adapt and survive in light of internal and external policies and politics. Like there has not been a moment in my career, and I'm sure in yours, where the sector is not responding to an external pressure, whether that's, I don't know, a student visa policy change, or a U-turn on student fees, or a cap on student recruitment numbers, or unexpectedly having to navigate a global pandemic. You know, so institutions really are adept at change and navigating those uncharted territories. So it's interesting then to spend some time thinking about how we talk about change management within a university when we're going through a period of transformation, because we are institutions that are really used to change and adapting, but actually sometimes we find that when we're changing and adapting internally, other challenges, we have to navigate some of those other challenges. So I think what I'm trying to say is that change is in our DNA. But when we talk about change, we want to then talk about how transformations can win, and how we can implement good change management practices. So in order to talk about that and to answer the questions and more, we're going to have Gareth Story here to talk with us. And amongst lots of other things, he's going to be talking with us about how Cardiff Met defined and underpinned their vision and principles in order to create the foundations for the transformation project. We're here a little bit about some of the challenges and wins they had when they're trying to get their change team off the ground and embedded into the institution. And we'll also hear about the vision for the student experience and their experiences in choosing the technologies to support them in delivering that. It's really going to be jam-packed, full of operational and strategic insight. And I'm really delighted that I'm here to be able to help facilitate the conversation. But firstly, over to you, Janine and Gareth.
Thanks, Melody. So let's kick off then with setting a vision. So I think one of the wonderful things, I know we're going to hear from Gareth in a moment, is how something simple like a vision statement and underpinning principles can really set the tone for how a digital transformation or transformation project can be pulled together collectively, but also then set the tone and the pace for the whole project. I think we often find that this is forgotten about. So sometimes we work with clients who end up creating their vision halfway through their project, and that's usually because they realise that there's going to change to the scope or something's happened, maybe a global pandemic happened right in the middle of their project and they've had to completely change tack and do something different. So setting a vision is something we would always advocate from the very, very start to do, because it really does enable everyone to come together to define those ways of working. So, I mean, we've got an example here just to show you what a vision could look like. So, it might be a statement, or it might be a set of statements with principles around what's going to ensure success. And often when I work with clients around vision setting, there's lots of at the beginning, well, at the moment we do it like this, and at the moment we have to do it like that, and we're constrained by this piece of tech, or the people we've got only want to do it this way. And what we do is use the session to be really forward thinking and aspirational about what we want to be like, how we want to achieve, what we want success to be like, how we want our students to experience their time at the institute, because then we've got a kind of barometer to work towards, and we can throw off those kind of shackles of internally set constraints. So what it should be is a statement or a set of principles, or both, that everybody's agreed to as well. Again, it's quite common for perhaps a senior team or a senior collective group of people to create a vision, and then it gets shared with the rest of the institute, and everyone is kind of asked to sign up to it. So we would say be really collaborative, bring together different groups of people and different business functions as well, because what works or what's important for one area may not work, or may be less of a priority for another area. So it's important to be really collaborative from the beginning. Yes, we want to be aspirational. We want to make sure that we know what we're going to achieve, but there may be constraints that we can't do anything about. For example, statutory compliance or regulations, or lengthy software contracts, or the like. So it's really important to acknowledge that sometimes there may be things that we can't do. For example, you wouldn't say, oh, well, let's just email every single person that's ever been interested in our institute and hope that they might be interested in coming, because we have to comply with GDPR, for example. So it is important to also know that there are some constraints which are immovable. The key thing is the vision statement should be really simple and easy to understand. And if anyone remembers that advert from the 90s, it should be like a Ronseal moment. It does what it says on the tin, right? So you should read it, everybody gets it. It shouldn't be jargon filled, and it should just be really easy to understand on first read. You need someone to explain it to us. And really what it also does is direct decision making, so that if something happens further on down the line and you want to test, well, actually, is that within the scope, or is that what we're trying to achieve here? You consistently come back to the vision statement. So again, there's no point in creating something like this and sharing it on the internet once and then never be looked at again. As some of our clients who have been really successful with vision have put it up on the wall within their offices, or for those of us that are working remotely, shared it on an intranet or a SharePoint site or something where we can consistently be reminded of it. It should permeate everything we say and do. And then I think finally, it's about setting those key measures for realising the benefits of the project, and not just at the end of the project. And if anyone's got to the end of a project, I'd love to know, because I feel like we're constantly always in the middle of the project. But in those key milestones, it's really good to look back and say, are we actually moving towards where we want to, or are there, do we need to change course slightly and reevaluate where we're going to? So that's our starter for 10. But Gareth, you, Cardiff Metropolitan University, have got their own vision statement, which you very kindly shared with us. So I wonder if you might just talk us through how you just, what this vision statement is telling us, and then how you decided upon it, how you came together to set this in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me this morning as well, firstly. And it's good to be on the call, and hopefully I can provide some useful insight for anyone watching and listening. It was exactly as you said, Janine, really, in terms of keeping it simple from the beginning. To give you a bit of history on the project, I came into post about 2.5 years ago, not from a HE background, and we built a team full of people sort of internally seconded within the university, which gave us a real wealth of knowledge from across various different departments. And it was key then when we sort of formed the project team that we had them on board to build this vision and principles. So it was really designed by the project team on the ground with the sort of the buy-in of the project exec, senior user, senior supplier. So it was a sort of joint approach, really, that to make sure we identified the key stakeholders, and a big part of that was obviously that sort of stakeholder mapping, which is very simplified on here in terms of the Venn diagram on the top left, the identification of the work streams, and what this is probably a more recent version, but originally we had TNE, higher degrees, and international as separate work streams. And what that created for us was a little bit of a silo as we mapped processes, and we then needed to make sure that they were fully integrated across that core student life cycle. So that sort of slightly changed the vision and principles document over the last couple of years. But the key thing in the sort of three blue boxes is what we want to achieve, how we want to do it, and what that's going to help us achieve in the long run, really. So the big thing for me on this was it was processes, business processes first, rather than technology first. It's very easy, and even now I have to curse a few people in the organisation for saying it's a student systems project, and trying to say it's a business process improvement project that we're going to put a system on top of. So that's the sort of key thing for me, and then having that sort of holistic system thinking approach to make sure that we have considered everything at the beginning, and then we can sort of de-scope as we go, rather than hopefully avoiding some scope creep over the sort of coming months and years.
Gareth, you mentioned this is one we're seeing here is not the first iteration. So am I right in thinking that you haven't got this hidden away in a drawer somewhere, that you are continually referring back to it? Absolutely,
yeah. We've reviewed it probably 3 or 4 times through the project life cycle so far, and obviously at the moment we're just starting, about to start that sort of system implementation piece, and it'll probably be reviewed again at this point, and just to make sure it's still accurate. I know one thing that the project board want is that sort of one-line tagline vision statement to go alongside it, and that's something we're working on at the moment. But yeah, we probably had 3 or 4 iterations of this over the last 2.5 years.
Wonderful. And I noticed you've got student life cycle project at the top, and that you've been correcting people calling it, the system replacement project. Has it helped to give it a name to kind of focus it so everyone knows that they're talking about the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been front and centre in terms of projects across the university, which has been great. We've had great top level buy-in from Vice Chancellor's executive group and directors across the university, because it's so wide reaching. You know, you've just got to look at the different work streams on the right hand side to see how many different departments across the university that hits, and therefore there's a huge stakeholder base that we're engaging with regularly. So yeah, student life cycle project, equally, you know, when people do call it student systems project, people still know what we're talking about, and it is just still focusing on those non-system elements of the project, which is absolutely crucial for me and for the project team to ensure that success. Really, I think we've had, like everyone has probably, IT systems projects that maybe don't go to plan. They either run late, they don't achieve what they want to, because it's all about the system. And for me, this project's much wider than that.
Wonderful. What a great segue into our next section, Gareth, around change.
Thanks very much, Janine and Gareth, for that really interesting insight into how you created your vision and principles, and then the work you've done at Cardiff Met to sort of embed that into the business and into the transformation. So if we talk a little bit about change and change teams and change management, because I know that Cardiff Met went through a few iterations of change management before you sort of settled on a version. And of course, everything is iterative and everything changes and everything, is dynamic and moves forward as the project moves forwards and the needs of the university change. But could you talk us through your thinking and some of the challenges you initially faced and how you settled on the current model and whether that's working for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first challenge we faced was it was the one role in the project that we didn't recruit to at the start of the project. No idea why, just one of those recruitment exercises. It didn't go brilliantly. And I think we reviewed the job description at that point, and as we started to build the team in the early days, we quickly realised we had someone within that team who had all the sort of attributes and skills to do that role. So the early days focus was really on upskilling the team. As I said, they'd come from all different parts of the university. So the focus originally was almost from a business analysis perspective and giving the team those skills. So obviously the first challenge then was when we brought a sort of change lead into post, is almost retrofitting some of that change methodology in, which was a massive challenge in itself, really, in terms of getting the buy-in from the project team, giving the stakeholders a clear understanding of what we're trying to achieve, and also, as you sort of said, is different iterations of a project and different things that you try. And we've not been afraid to change, I think, as things have either gone well, we've done more of it. If they haven't gone well, okay, let's stop, let's review what can we do differently. Some of the key things that have worked from us from a change perspective is mapping all of the stakeholders in terms of their knowledge, attitude, skills, habits, power, interest, getting a really in-depth analysis of all of our stakeholders at all levels, really. So that's been the first thing, as well as also utilising methodologies, things like the Kubler-Ross change curve, and just trying to sort of embed some of that thinking into our sort of everyday conversations, really. More recently, we've undertaken sort of change impact assessments and gap analysis, and amongst sort of the workstream leads and their wider teams. And it just gives us a bit of an idea of how big that change gap is and what the sort of change strategies and activities are to overcome those. The other sort of key thing for us was building a network of change agents. It's been a bit of a challenge because I think people have seen that as a bit of a phrase that they maybe aren't familiar with, and then getting the buy-in from line managers to get sort of more operational system end users, process end users on board. It's been a bit of a challenge, but we're building that network quite nicely now. But the overall sort of the objective around building that change team has been that we want to do change with people and not to them. And I think that's been key. And I think in many ways, COVID's probably helped with that, because change has people have got used to changing, I think, more so than ever over the last 18 months.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested to know a little bit more about the change impact assessments that you've been doing across the business. How's that been? I guess how's that been received by the various functions that you've been working with?
Yeah, it's been really well received, actually. I think there's occasionally there's a bit of hostility when we talk about things like structure and strategy, and I guess some of the questions can be perceived as slightly invasive. But actually, in terms of people are understanding that Cardiff Met anyway is a very people first organisation, which is great. Sure. And actually, we're understanding. We want to understand the team, the people, rather than dumping a system on people, and that's probably the key thing for all of our messaging. And it's it's a hand-holding exercise, whether it's with line managers or the wider teams, and we just want to guide people through that change, and that's been the key message in getting that success with the change impact assessments, really.
So why do you think that change? Why do you think having a change team? Because I appreciate you didn't have one initially, and then it very quickly became apparent that it was integral to the success. But why do you think having a change team was so important for Cardiff Met, and also for any transformational program of works?
I think it's historically some of the lessons learned from big projects we've worked on in the past are, for instance, our last student record system we put in 2010, and the project team at that time consisted of project manager and project support. So I think anyone who's ever tried to do any project of that size would know that was not the level of team you needed, and therefore everything towards the back end obviously became a bit panic stations to implement a system, and therefore certain aspects of the project were de-scoped and or sort of toned down a little bit, and therefore the system came in and people maybe didn't know how to maximize the benefits from the system. Yeah. And the change was really significant. I think people were probably, as it was before my time, but people were probably quite overawed by that change. Whereas now it's a sort of a gradual thing that we keep chipping away at. We're making changes constantly, whether that's small process changes and quick wins, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later, or some of the big stuff, the high effort, high impact stuff in terms of system configuration and some of the more complex process changes. So it's creating confidence in the stakeholders by sort of chipping away, taking people through the sort of lower level, the simpler changes. So then the big stuff maybe doesn't seem quite as overawing as it maybe has in the past.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess I'm always curious, and I always ask people who own and have management of sort of change management teams. But do you have any tips for building a successful change management function?
I think we went out with the job description. The job description said, qualifications here and there and everything else. But actually, the person is the most important, and they've got to be a real people person, someone who's not afraid to challenge, someone who has got really high levels of empathy, and a real understanding to listen and to hear between the lines of what stakeholders are saying in a project. And I think that's the key, that you could sit in an hour meeting and there might be one throwaway comment, but actually that throwaway comment is what's actually going to affect you 2 years, 6 months down the line, because that's what their deep-rooted belief is in terms of whether it's cynicism or positivity. And that person who can maybe listen and pick up on that is more important than having the change qualifications and everything like that. That can be gained through external courses and things. So we just found a couple of people in the change team who had that right attitude and understanding and empathy, really.
Sure, and could go out to the university and provide the confidence, right, because they're the face of the transformation in some senses.
Yeah.
So if we move on a little bit from creating a change team to talk a little bit about how you adopted a digital first approach. Now, for people who are sort of here watching the webinar today, this is a fairly standard digital maturity model, which Acontis also uses to sort of help universities define where they are versus where they might like to be in terms of their sort of digital first approach. So Gareth, I mean, I could talk us through this, but really it would be great if you could tell us where you felt you guys were on this particular model, which level you are at the beginning of the student lifecycle project, and then where you think you might like to see yourselves or where your aspirational to be is.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, when I started in the organisation 2.5 years ago now, we were probably around about level 1. We had a lot of digital channels, but they weren't all linked in. Things like poor data quality is obviously a big resulting factor of that. So very much in that sort of evolution stage.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, I'd say we're sort of hovering between level 2 and 3. So very much in the transition phase. A lot of work that we're doing at the moment is around 2B process mapping, finding automations, reducing the number of workarounds, things like spreadsheets and things that happen outside of any system, it feels like. So that's probably where we're at the moment. And I think once we embed the system element of the project and we redesign integrations, we remap a lot of the data and migrate it to a new system, and we deal with some of these big ticket items on the processes, I think I'd like to think we'll be somewhere between level 4 and 5. Inevitably, there's going to be a lot of challenges along the way, especially with the big ticket items. But I think there is a real desire in Cardiff Met to get rid of a lot of the Excel spreadsheets and to actually make those changes at the moment and actually have a system that's not designed for today but for tomorrow.
Sure. I mean, that's great. I mean, level 4, level 5, they are also dynamic parts of the, as the technology progresses and your ability to interrogate data becomes more, complex. There is always room for that to continue forward, isn't there? But it's amazing to hear that you've already moved up a couple of those levels just by virtue of the work that you've been doing. How has the journey been so far? So what have been the biggest challenges that you faced when attempting to get from that sort of level 1 through to level 2, 3?
I mean, the main challenge over the last 18 months, and I know everyone will probably say it, but it has been COVID, because we'd mapped 350 as-is business processes across the life cycle. We gather requirements ready for procurement, and actually alongside that procurement, our intention was to start the 2B mapping, and it sort of got put on hold for probably the best part of 12 months actually, to focus around the procurement and actually BAU, keeping the lights on, because that was the most important thing. We had a lot of other things such as no detriment policy across the university, and obviously a project like this is quite heavily registry focused, and therefore we needed all hands on deck when it came to registry, and even a couple of my team got sort of seconded back into their old jobs to help out at key times of the year. So that's probably been the biggest challenge, I think, and actually now we've almost had to sort of build momentum again over the last probably 4 or 5 months through the 2B mapping, because it was such a stop in March 2020 that actually we've had to re-engage stakeholders. We've had to realign them with the process maps. We've had to go over old ground and understand what's changed for them amongst in COVID as well, because there was actually a lot of process change that happened organically over that time. So that's probably been the key thing for us. It has really been COVID, but the buy-in now is there from stakeholders, and we're getting a lot of really good collaboration.
Sure. So it's really interesting that you say that lots of organic process change happened in response to COVID. I can imagine every institution in the UK, probably globally, had to all of a sudden rethink some of the way that they did some of that work. Do you think that's helped with the buy-in? That's not specifically related to the digital first experience necessarily, but do you think that COVID has helped get the buy-in to the project because they've had to organically do that process optimization anyway? It's massively helped, because I think people are now not as afraid of change as they maybe once were, and things that have happened organically. A great example we've got is exam boards. Everyone talked about doing online exam boards. The process was really clunky beforehand in the way that we delivered those, and now all of a sudden they had to happen online last year.
and the academic staff, the registry staff who were involved in that process then went, actually, that wasn't so bad, was it? And now, oh, actually, how can we innovate online exam boards? Whereas that seemed like a really big barrier probably 18 months ago. Then now actually it's not a barrier at all, and now they're looking to innovate further. So yeah, there's been some real positive change, and that's just one example.
Yeah, okay, that's great to hear, isn't it? That really helps.
Thanks, Melody. So I think moving on from that area, let's go into talk about student experience. We've heard a bit about the technology changes, Gareth, and the processes. I know we're going to come back onto that in a second, but I guess the magic triangle really is the people. So we've heard about the change side. Let's focus on our audiences, our students for a second. So, and I know many of you watching this webinar today will probably have heard of personas before, and some of you might have them. And again, Gareth very kindly agreed to share with us some of the examples from Cardiff Met as well. So, but for those of you that maybe haven't used personas before, or haven't used them for a long time, or just want a bit of a refresher, a persona is a fictitious representation of a key user segment. So somebody that could want to engage with your institute, and they could be at any stage on that engagement with you. So they could be an applicant, they could be somebody currently studying, they could be an alumni, they could be somebody coming back for further study. And the idea of personas is that they represent key user segments, and that they're created using real information. So really, you should be able to look at them, and they should look and feel like a real person, even though they're not. And there's a few different ways to lay them out. Here's our example here. So you might have some kind of biographical information about them, the type of person they are, where they might reside, what they might be interested in, whether or not they're an applicant or a current student, or they've already graduated. And there should be some information about what it is they're kind of currently interested in. So, we call this pains, gains, jobs to be done. So what's difficult for them, what's going well for them, and what are they kind of interested in day to day, what's kind of hot topic for them at that sort of slice in time. And then what sort of relationship are they having with your institute? So, what's their experience of engaging with you? What touch points are they using? So they're kind of coming in, seeing people face to face, or probably increasingly engaging with you using your website or other digital tools, chatbots if you've got them, or telephone lines. And also what's really key is what value are they deriving from that relationship that they're having from you. So, yes, they want to be, gaining their qualifications, but are they tapping into the social aspect, or have they been doing a placement, or are they accessing, funding or scholarships, that kind of thing. So, so the idea is that you'd probably have a sweet spot somewhere between 6 and 8 personas, and I have seen some organisations go a bit crazy with it. You'll get a whole suite of 20 or 30 personas, as they, just want to make sure they've captured absolutely everybody. And whilst I can understand that approach, really what personas should be doing is giving you an idea of the key segments that you're looking to interact with for a particular reason. And again, perhaps a pitfall that we often see is people creating personas for a well-trodden path. And what I mean by that is those students that they know really well, that they could just conjure up out of their mind really quickly and get them on a piece of paper because they feel familiar to them, and they're used to working with them and engaging with them regularly. And actually what's really good about personas is creating personas for groups of segments that you don't know very well. So perhaps that demographic that you're looking to attract into your institute, or that has a difficult time, or that is from a part of the country or part of the world that doesn't come to your university, and you're really, really interested in attracting them. So knowing more about them will help you to really engage with them. And again, I've seen some brilliant examples of personas before, and then when I say to clients, can I see them? They say, oh yeah, they're buried on SharePoint somewhere. So some marketing team created them 5 years ago. We've never really used them, but yeah, we've got personas. Yeah, we're really tapped into using personas, and they're not actually being actively used. So, you know, people are not saying, right, what's Jenny interested in? We've got an issue with our engineering students, and they're finding it difficult to enroll on time. What is it that we know about Jenny that would help us improve that digital experience? So the idea is that you talk about them and you use them like they could be a real person. So Gareth, you've created a set of personas at Cardiff Metropolitan University, and I know that you've shared Kerry with us. Are you good to just talk us through how you came up with Kerry?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we created about 6 student personas in the end, covering, we think about 85-90% of the sort of key characteristics across, I think it's about 12-13 categories, I think, across for various categories. So it was really sort of, this one was almost a sort of probably the easiest one to do. It's an undergraduate from locally in Wales, sport course, obviously what Cardiff Met is sort of a bread and butter really. So this was probably the easiest one that we had to come up with in terms of what does Kerry's journey look like, what's their engagement, language, digital capabilities, things like academic technology and monetary skills. So we just looked at all those different sort of key characteristics, and across the 6 personas tried to cover off as much as we could. So then when we got to sort of the process design, which is obviously on the next slide, that we could almost take a student from inquiry through to alumni using that persona, and think about all those different sort of interactions they might have with the university, and the sort of touch points in different processes, so we could start to understand what that student journey looked like from their perspective. And again, as an undergraduate student who's fairly well engaged, there was a lot of sort of straight lines, I guess, on the process in many ways. There wasn't too much complexity on this one. Obviously within this diagram, I know it's really small to sort of fit on the slide, but it takes the student through the different work streams on the bottom and where those interactions and touch points are. In the middle row, it looks at the different system interactions that they might have during their time at Cardiff Met, and obviously the different aspects of the process. So it's some of the basics. It'd just be self-service enrolment, module selection, whether it's things like access to the sort of wellbeing funds and things like that, how they progress through exam boards, resits, that sort of thing. It just gives us a bit of a sort of an overall flavour of what that journey looks like, and then we can maybe what we've done since is we can dig deeper into that journey, look at those touch points in more depth, and start to create focus groups based on that persona really. And obviously this sort of final slide mapped the system interactions, and the most interesting one on this one was the international student that we mapped as a persona. I think in that persona we had someone who was English as a second language, came from I think it was China, and coming to Cardiff Met, and they had something like 40 system interactions during their time at Cardiff Met, which was incredible considering the different interfaces they'd have to deal with. As I said, with something like English as a second language, we went, wow, that system journey isn't an effective one, and that's something we need to do something about. So as we're starting to plan that student journey going forward and the system interactions going forward, it's reducing those number of systems, improving the interfaces, making sure the data integrations are good, and making that journey as simple as we can, understanding that obviously there's always going to be challenges with any sort of system project like that. But it was a really shocking one for us to understand that there was so many system interactions that a student might have to have during their time at Cardiff Met, and potentially difficult ones as well, with them not maybe knowing what system to interact with at what time, and making sure that was communicated with them. So that was a really interesting find for us.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, I'm spellbound when you said 40, Gareth, and as you say, you know, being able to do that, and if English is your first language, would be hard enough. But yeah. But that, I mean, that's really interesting. I think, you know, what you've just shown us there is you know, 2 points I'm going to come on to talk about here on life cycle mapping, but also what we call task mapping or student experience mapping. So, you know, here's another example of what that could look like. I love your diagram. I know it was hard to see on that second slide, but I think it was really, again, you know, great advocate of things that are just clear and easy to follow. So the idea is, as you said, Gareth, about tracking students through their life cycle. So, you know, in this example here, you know, could be, you know, applicant all the way through to alumni, depending on what type of persona you're looking at, and then look at it from their experience. And when they're here, what are they experiencing? What are they, you know, what are they actually doing, and what are they interacting with? And I think those digital interactions are really important, especially during the last 18 months when you know, students have also been accessing their teaching and learning from remotely as well. And then I think, as you said, Gareth, moving on from, you know, the kind of as is, what's currently happening, that then enables you to start plotting out, you know, a desired journey, a to-be journey. So, you know, at the moment they're doing this, how would we want that journey to be for them? And I think what's really interesting as well is when you start to tap into your existing processes and work out, well, how is the process we've currently got having an impact on that journey? So life cycle mapping is great for looking at, you know, the whole shebang, if you like, from beginning to end of the life cycle. Task mapping or experience mapping is a way of saying, right, what type of experiences are our student or applicant having when they come to engage with us for a specific thing. So when they come to us to do X, what is their experience? It's you know, using real context, real user behaviours, putting yourself in their shoes, if you like, what actually happens when they come to do that thing. What are they seeing and hearing and thinking and feeling and saying and doing? And again, if you've got personas, it really puts some flavour behind, you know, what that key user demographic, you know, actually could be experiencing when they come to our institute to undertake a certain thing, like choosing classes for next semester, or, you know, coming to an open day, for example. So Gareth, earlier we heard a lot about how you know, the vision for the project, you know, started Cardiff Met off thinking about, you know, what you wanted to achieve both for your staff but also for your students. I guess it'd be great to know in practice how you've incorporated student experience into that bigger life cycle project. We've seen your vision now, so how have your personas and your vision kind of worked together?
It's been a challenging area, actually, and again, without labouring the point, obviously COVID has been a challenge with, you know, students learning very differently, not being on campus, and having a very different student experience to obviously a couple of years ago. So when we mapped the sort of the processes, we did it mainly with sort of professional academic staff. So we understood where the student interactions were, but probably not the detail of them, which was probably our first challenge. So there was quite a few assumptions in terms of what staff feel that students do or don't like about the processes. We also had data around things like inquiries, one thing we call the I zone, which is sort of our sort of central hub for student inquiries. So we took a lot of data from that, and that sort of gave us some ideas of probably what was confusing for a student, what maybe wasn't working so well. So that was probably the first challenge, and as I said, the difficulty in access over the last 18 months especially. The other sort of challenge really was that everyone wants to look at student engagement, student retention, and you've got a number of different projects, groups around the university from an academic and a professional services point of view, who are all wanting to send out things like surveys. They want to talk to the school rep structure, start focus groups with students, speak to different courses individually. And actually, there's probably a little bit of fatigue amongst students in terms of the amount of surveys and things that they're asked to participate in. And everyone's obviously got the same carrot of things like an Amazon voucher and things like that. So it has been a real challenge, and the personas have been really crucial in that, in terms of, yes, we're making assumptions, but we're trying to walk through that journey as in depth as we can. And obviously with students being back on campus, at least half back on campus now, we're looking at the moment about what we deliver in the next 12 months. We've obviously had a few delays through the last couple of years, and now we're going, right, new academic year. The student journey is a little bit closer to how it was before, and actually maybe this is the new student journey. It's a bit of a hybrid way of learning. And what do those personas look like now, and actually how do we engage those students in the focus groups? And we've got a few different ideas around how we set up those focus groups and things now, and probably trying to stray away from surveys as much as possible. But I think the big win for us will come when we're sort of configuring a new system, that we utilize students through that sort of user experience testing around the interfaces, and actually is that digital journey good, bad or indifferent, and actually what can we improve from that point onwards. So we'll look to approach the sort of system implementation with a fairly agile mindset, iterative testing, and making sure that we're involving students throughout that. And the SU, our team have had multiple meetings over the last couple of years, and even met with them yesterday on the new sort of student VP. So they're really on board with that, and looking to help us out as much as possible, despite the multiple challenges across the university of student engagement.
Thanks, Gareth. And I'm sure everybody on watching the webinar will appreciate your honesty there as well, about the fact that it has been quite challenging to keep up with getting that student insight as well. I think an area that I know Cardiff Met have done a lot of work around is around operational efficiency. So you mentioned already, Gareth, process mapping. We do a lot of work with clients around either what we call process discovery or process mapping, which is essentially lifting the lid and just finding out what is currently happening. So tending to use some key questions that I've got on the screen here. So, and it's essentially what do you do, what happens, where do you start this process, and what is it trying to achieve, which sounds like a fairly straightforward question, although when I work with groups sometimes I get various different answers about what a particular process is trying to achieve. But it's really interesting to know, how complex is this process? Does it have lots of external stakeholders, or is it moving from one department, one business function to another? Do you have tools or systems that you use? And I put tools as well as systems because it's staggering actually the huge reliance on Excel and bits of paper and access databases and all sorts of hidden nasties, hidden things that people have just used for years and years to cope to kind of get the job done. And sometimes I'd a bit embarrassed to sort of say, well yeah, this is how we currently do it, and no, we didn't actually have time to stop and think about whether or not it was the best way or the right way or the quickest way. We just we've just got to get on with the business as usual stuff of getting the job done. The question I always love is it documented? And people go, yeah, absolutely. And I say, well, if you were to win the lottery and I did your job tomorrow, how would I be able to follow what you're doing? And then that's when everyone sort of shifts around their seat a bit and looks a bit nervous and says, oh, well, when Margaret was here 20 years ago, she wrote down how to do it, and I've still got her bit of paper here. And that's how we do this process. And how valuable is it? And again, a question that sometimes makes people nervous, but is it of strategic importance to the university? And that's not to say that if it isn't, you should necessarily stop doing it, but it may be that you decide to prioritize making another process more efficient if it has that strategic importance. Because once you've done that and you've mapped your processes out, your as-is processes, as you've done, Gareth, or you've done that discovery and kind of, you had a look at what you've currently got, that's when you can start to say, well, look, there's some opportunities for improvement here or here, or actually we could use our existing technology much better here, or if we were to invest in that new bit of technology here, we could do that, or actually, we could free up some people's time by using intelligent automation here, and then those people here could do some more value added work over there. And so I think really what happens is when you put that together with the student experience work, that's when you get, the beginnings of what we would call student improvement strategy. So it's, this is the experience we've got, and this is the experience we want our students, applicants to have. This is how we're currently doing it, and this is how we want to do it. Let's put the two together, and then let's work out what we want to deliver and in which way, and then which underpinning technology is going to let us do that. So Gareth, we talked a lot at the beginning about setting visions and bringing all the institution along with change, but focusing on these operational aspects now. Can you tell us a bit more about how you approach process discovery and optimization? And as you have been doing, I know you'll tell us the challenges as well, because you've been wonderfully honest with us. But process discovery. How was that for Cardiff Met?
It was from a starting point of not a lot existing. Obviously, a lot of projects have happened across the university, and some of which have involved process mapping, but it's been for the sort of the key process within whatever that sort of smaller project has been. So what we hadn't had at the beginning was anyone who come in and when right across the whole life cycle, can we map the entire end-to-end business processes, understand the dependencies, the different interactions between departments and things, and actually get to a level of detail that we understood the whole life cycle. And exactly that sort of line you used, Janine, in terms of making sure that if people disappear tomorrow for whatever reason, that who can pick up that job role, whereas a lot of things were stored in people's heads. And actually, the buy-in across most departments was very good. And we mapped 350 processes between, I think it was about September and January 2019 into 2020. So it was a lot. And I think the one thing from the team is what I had to keep a handle on is where do we stop? Because I think you map them at a certain level, and then you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And we could have probably mapped comfortably over 1,000 processes, I think, if we'd have gone into the right level of that level of detail. But for me, it was a case of mapping it against the user capability model, understanding what happened in each department. And actually the key discovery for us was how siloed a lot of departments work. That, oh, by the way, that process goes over there to the schools and they deal with that. We don't know what they do, but it takes them forever to come back to us. So we started to understand then the pain points. And then obviously we'd go and talk to the schools and we'd map the process in a bit more depth. And the schools would often say, well, we don't understand what registry do or whatever like that. And again, you start to build this sort of catalogue of pain points, which has then given us the opportunity to have that in to improve. So we've used various sort of techniques in terms of process optimization. We've looked at lean, we've looked at root cause analysis through things like a Ishikawa fishbone, 5 whys. And almost has been a bit of a horses for courses strategy in terms of how we approach that process optimization. But a lot of the times, actually, the process improvement has just been brought about by collaboration between departments and actually getting people in a room that they haven't had the opportunity to do before and go, right, so you taught me through what you do, and then it leads on to what you do. And, oh, right, oh, yeah, so if we did that, then, oh, brilliant, that would save everyone a lot of time, effort, headaches, etc. So that's probably been the key thing for us. And I think over recent months, as we've come out of the procurement and the back end of COVID, we've focused around the sort of quick wins. How do we build confidence in stakeholders in what we're doing, and looking at those sort of low effort, high impact changes. And we've probably focused only so far around about 12 to 15 process improvements. But it's already starting to have that knock-on effect of departments are feeling confident in the project, what we're trying to deliver. People can see that they've got more time for value-added activity, and they can see that collaboration has happened a lot better across the different departments in the university. So hopefully then, when we get onto the really difficult stuff, the more system-related stuff, then actually we've got that buy-in across staff to go, yeah, those guys know what they're doing, the SLP team, and can deliver on it. So that's probably where we're at the moment, and a long way to go. I think we will probably end up looking at, I'd say, the best part of 70, 80 processes, I think, across the project, by the time we get to the end. And each one's got its own challenge and complexity, I think.
Absolutely fascinating. I mean, sorry, I could have done the whole webinar just on that last 5 minutes, Gareth. That was absolutely fascinating. I'm gonna invite Melody to step back in, and I know that we've got some questions in the Q&A around this area too. So hopefully we'll be able to get time to move on to those.
Yeah, I mean there are quite a few questions here, which is great, and thank you so much. I really was a deeply interesting dive into the subject. So I have one final series of questions really around choosing technology, which I know is always a really interesting, I want to say, pinch point for universities. So it's quite often a chicken and egg situation here, where you might choose a technology and then build your transformation around the technology that you have chosen. And then there are other, ways of doing it where you do the sort of legwork, you do that process optimization, you look at what you have and what you need and your visions and your principles, and then you choose the technology to help you support that and get you to where you need to be. Can you talk to us a little bit about how Cardiff Metropolitan chose their technologies and maybe some of the challenges? I know you've been really honest about challenges, but some of the challenges you might have faced around making those decisions?
Yeah, I think the journey for us started pretty much 2 years ago to the day, in terms of, if I actually started a long time before that, in terms of the business case and building that and getting that buy-in at the top level, and making sure that we had the budget to not be constrained by the financial implications of a new student record system. So the first thing when our team formed, really, I said 2 years ago, was that pre-market engagement. We did a lot of work looking in depth at the different suppliers on the market, speaking to other universities. I think we got 5 or 6 companies in to do a half-day demo, to give our key stakeholders that flavour of what was on offer on the market, what might work, what might not work. That fed into a requirements gathering exercise, which threw up a lot of different requirements and challenges across departments, who are all asking for almost the same thing, but not quite the same thing. And then we obviously had to sort of rationalise that sort of requirements specification almost. We went out to tender last August, and through the APUC framework that we use, Scottish Universities framework. And we'd been quite delayed last year, obviously, so when everyone had to go and work from home in March, and then unfortunately our procurement lead was ill for a few months and has since retired. So that team was very sort of thin on the ground, which for a major procurement like this was less than ideal. So that caused us a few delays, but actually once we got into the procurement itself, the key win for us was we involved 50 people across the 11 panels, and 50 people. I mean, everyone called me a lot of silly names at the start to say, "What are you thinking?" Normally we do a procurement with 3 to 5 people in a room, and they'd make the decision. But the key thing for me was that collaboration and buy-in to the decision of whichever supplier we choose, we need to make sure that buy-in exists, and we had that. And it was a lot of work for my team in the background to support that process with so many people involved. But actually the sort of the fruits of that, where everyone sort of bought into the decision, were happy with it, they understood the requirements, the responses, the look and feel of the supplier and things, and that was key for me, really. So that was how we ended up where we are now, really.
Would you have done, because essentially what you're talking about here is a really comprehensive early market engagement process, right? You've gone out, you've approached suppliers, vendors, you've asked them to come in and demonstrate how they might meet the requirements that you have, and then you were at the same time, or subsequently, then sort of did that requirements gathering piece. Would you have done things different? Do you think there might have been a moment where you would have done things differently, or changed the way that you'd done it, or the processes that you went through?
I think there's things I've debated long and hard, but I think that actually the buy-in and the collaboration was worth more than how we could have done it differently, possibly. I think that even though we did quite a lot of pre-market engagement, I still think we probably could have done more in terms of talking to more universities in depth, and some of the questions that maybe I asked at the time, in hindsight, I'd have asked maybe slightly different questions to get a different feel for what was on offer. And I think that the other key lesson is the amount of time and resources that was needed. And I can understand why people would take the simple approach of, we know what supplier we want, we know what system we want. 3 people in a room can do a very simple evaluation process, but the key, we built reams of feedback, quite complex scoring processes as well. But we have the team and resources in which to do that, so that was probably key for us. But I think another day with a different set of resources, we do things completely different. But equally, there isn't a huge amount I change really, other than that maybe that a bit more pre-market engagement. It was almost, no matter how much you do, I think the questions you ask can still be slightly different.
Sure. I mean, that's great. I'm really mindful that we're already running over, and and we have some questions from the audience, and I'd really like to get to those. So Janine, I'll hand over to you if that's all right, and perhaps you can facilitate those questions, and we might skip the summary slide.
Yeah. Thanks, Melody. I know we were ambitiously hoping to also get some poll questions, but I'm wondering if we can send those out afterwards and get our attendees to do them. So I've just been tapping away. I've put an answer in as well to the Q&A, but let's start with Neil Wilson, who wants to know, and I think really this is to you, Gareth, how, it's great to bring staff in and get those SMEs, but Neil, I think Neil wants to know practically how did you free them up from their day job to give them proper time to invest into the project?
I mean, the project team itself, as I said, there was a lot of internal secondment, so that was part of the business case before my time, in terms of making sure we had that staff budget for that sort of core project team, which is 8 of us, from a sort of project management, change, business analysis perspective, plus a couple of developers as well. So it's a fairly sizable team in itself, and it gave us a lot of knowledge from around the university. In terms of the others, I think the buy-in at sort of director level was absolutely crucial, in terms of making sure this project was front and centre, and whether that was professional services staff in registry, the project exec and senior user within registry, so they were happy to make sure that was involved in people's work plans, or whether that was in the schools and actually school administrative staff, programme directors, other sort of admissions leads and things within the schools that actually, because we had quite a large executive project board, but actually just making sure those conversations were happening early. And we understood probably the pinch points in in the academic year, in their work plans, that, don't talk to admissions during clearing, an obvious one. But, okay, so when do we plan that work with admissions for the process mapping? It was probably, October, November. Don't talk to assessment and progression in May, June or January because of exam boards. So we mapped out that year and had a bit of a heat map to understand that, right, we need to talk to this department at this time to get the results we need. And we sort of planned that into the year and the work programme to maximise the time we had with people, rather than sort of stumbling into June and going, I need to talk to assessment and progression now, because obviously they tell us where to go, really.
And I think some of that neatly fits into Roxanne's question in the chat. Actually, she wants to know how big is your change plan, but also, and you mentioned senior management there, and she feels like I'm sure many of you do, that sometimes senior management just want everything done really, really quickly, and that it's important to bring them on the journey as well and get them to understand that Roxanne calls it it's a sprint. This is a more marathon approach than just get. And although you probably with your process mapping did identify some quick wins, Gareth, it's managing expectations. So yeah, how big's the change team, and how are you managing especially senior management expectation?
So the change team directly to me is just 2 at the moment, who are almost our change leads. However, we've got 3 roles within the team. There was 5, we should slightly rehash the team. So it's 3 at the moment called implementation officers, and they have a massive role to play in terms of that stakeholder engagement, change management, and their sort of role is quite a hybrid one in terms of they do some business analysis stuff, some PM stuff, some change stuff. But that's been sort of key for me, is having everyone in my team is bought into that change management philosophy, change and engagement philosophy. And in terms of the senior management wanting everything done at pace, I've been really, really fortunate, and it's actually changed my mindset as a PM hugely, that it's been quality over time and cost massively. We haven't got over budget at all yet. Early days, I suppose, but no, we're well within budget. Time-wise, it's been absolutely secondary to quality, and I can't underestimate how helpful that is as a PM, because sometimes I've got, I need to get this done, and then I'm just asked the question about, why do you need to get it done now? Actually, is it better to take another week to do that, to do it better, than rush it through? And yeah, there's always time in any project where, time is the biggest factor, and there has been at various points, don't get me wrong, but the overall thing is we want to deliver a high quality project, business process improvement system project, however you look at it, across the whole thing. So it's been quality first.
Absolutely. Jane's got a question which is about end user research, and I think this maybe fits into the question about student experience earlier. I've answered a question in the chat already around understanding demographics, and Melody, if I could bring you in here as well. I think in terms of understanding, like getting those personas as accurate as possible, and I've answered in the chat, our approach would always be, create your draft, then test it out by speaking to some actual real life humans, and then create it again. But Melody, end user research with applicants and students, any top tips there?
I mean, I think what you suggested, with creating personas, you create your draft, you get out there, you talk to your end users, you have a conversation with them, you bring them on board so they understand what it is they're doing, why they're doing it, and ask them to contribute in a way that is going to be meaningful for your work, but also meaningful for them. So that would be my top tip. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And then just the final question, I think, Gareth, from one of our watchers here, who wants to know, he absolutely loves the process mapping, just wants to know really how long it took you, and including finding those 40 interaction points.
Yeah, so in terms of the process mapping the as-is, took a team of 6 of us, 3 months roughly to map all of that. So yeah, we started in September, October 2019, and we finished in sort of beginning of January, obviously with a bit of Christmas in the middle. In terms of those interaction points with students, I think we a lot of it comes out of sort of HESA data sets and things that we pulled together, but also then we delved into some of the more pertinent issues, so things like preferred gender, what else was there? Sort of language preferences, and a few other things around that: disability, physical disability, learning additional needs, things like that. So we delved into some of those sort of more pertinent issues to make sure we covered off some of those smaller points, but equally with that sort of mindset of a bit 80-20, we can probably cover 80% of things, but there's going to be that one student who is a complete exception to the rule, and being pragmatic to know we couldn't cover absolutely everything.
Absolutely. And Melody, if doing full process mapping might feel like a bit of a daunting task for some, would you advocate a sort of a slightly shorter process discovery exercise, and how much time do you think institutes should invest in an activity like that?
I mean, absolutely. Shorter process discovery pieces are really helpful for universities to get a sort of benchmark of what it is that they need to do in the sort of wider, bigger, deeper piece. So, we've done sessions which are a morning or an afternoon per department, where we just do a piece of process discovery. We sit there, we talk with them, we understand what it is that they do, we get a broad sense of then what needs to be done in that sort of maybe phase 2. We've done 1 or 2 day sessions per function. Really, it's it's been a dynamic process with the institutions that we work with to make sure that we are tailoring what we do to fit their needs at their moment in time. You know, as Gareth alluded to, there's no point grabbing the admissions team during clearing to try and do a piece of work on process discovery around the admissions process. But certainly we've been able to tailor our process discovery to meet the university requirements and time restrictions. But it's a super helpful piece of work to do. You know, that process discovery is really helpful for any institution that's thinking about embarking on transformational change, however big or however small, whether it's across the entire university or whether it's just, you know, within one function. We found that the institutions have really found the outputs of those process discoveries really helpful for then helping them plan what the actual implementation looks like, or whatever the transformation looks like.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, I'm sorry again. Thanks. There's so many of you that have stayed on to the end with this, which we're delighted. So thank you so much. We have overrun, but Gareth, you proved to be such a popular guest appearance. There were so many questions for you, but I'm glad we managed to get them. And I guess that just leaves me to say thank you again, Gareth, for the time that you've dedicated to being part of this webinar. Thank you enormously to Melody in your first fully Qantas webinar today. And really just to end with a question to those of you watching this webinar, to tell us a bit more about what's happening at your institute, and would you like to be a guest at one of our future events? If you are interested, do drop us a quick message at hello@qantas.com, or connect with Melody or I on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to do a virtual coffee or even an in-person coffee these days. To hear more about what's going on. So thank you very much, and hope everyone has a safe rest of the day.
Bye everyone.
Cheers.